Hello and welcome to Crossroads of Rockland History. I'm Clare Sheridan from the Historical Society of Rockland County. Our topic today is Ramapo Mountain Iron and the American Revolution. And my guest today is Susan Deeks, the Executive Director at the Historical Society of Rockland County. Sue will be giving a talk on this topic on July 26th at the Historical Society of Rockland County, so this will be a bit of a sneak preview for that presentation. This episode of Crossroads of Rockland History is being sponsored by the town of Ramapo, Supervisor Michael Specht, and the Ramapo Town Board. We are grateful for their support of this program and of the Historical Society of Rockland County. The Historical Society of Rockland County is a nonprofit educational institution and principal repository for original documents and artifacts relating to Rockland County. Its headquarters are a 4-acre site featuring a history museum and the 1832 Jacob Lovell House located at 20 Zucker Road in New City, New York. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places and a designated New York State Path Through History site. Part of our broad and challenging mission is to share the history of Rockland County with the public. The Historical Society is pleased to announce that during the month of July, if you open a new membership or upgrade an existing membership, there are special perks for you. To learn more about this revolutionary membership campaign, visit our website at rocklandhistory.org. The Historical Society relies on financial support from people just like you. We hope you will consider donating, becoming a member, or upgrading an existing membership. That web address again is rocklandhistory.org. Susan Deeks is the Executive Director of the Historical Society of Rockland County and a former director of the Friends of the Long Pond Ironworks in West Milford, New Jersey. She has a master's degree in history with a concentration in the industrial history of the Lower Hudson Valley and specialization in the historical iron mines, forges, and furnaces that operated in the Ramapo Mountains from 1764 to 1888. Welcome back, Susan, and thank you for joining me today. Before we begin speaking about your appearance on July 26th, please take a moment and tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
For the past 13 years, I've been the executive director at the Historical Society of Rockland County, but my real interest in public history began in 1990 after I took a tour of the standing structures and industrial ruins at Long Pond Ironworks State Park in Hewitt, New Jersey. Until then, I'd always thought of historic sites as highly polished, restored properties connected to people or events with high status and obvious historical significance. But I was captivated by the abandoned early industrial site as it was slowly being reclaimed by the forest. And over the next 35 years, I've devoted a great deal of volunteer time to learning about and telling the stories of the often forgotten enterprises and workers who made the iron on which the foundation of America's industrial might was built.
So, geographically speaking, where were the deposits of iron in our region?
Northwestern Rockland County is very rich in iron. It's roughly the area from the Bear Mountain Bridge running southwest to the Suffern-Mahwah border, and it encompasses the Ramapo Mountains that divides current Rockland from Orange County, as well as most of Harriman State Park. This whole region lies within a geographical formation known as the Redding Prong. The prong was formed through earthquakes and upheavals in the Earth's formation, and it starts in New Hampshire and runs diagonally to Reading, Pennsylvania. It's characterized by wide and deep veins of very high quality magnetite iron ore.
How did the geography make the Ramapo region suitable for mining and production?
Well, the veins of magnetite often cropped up above ground level because they were created by earth upheavals. It actually, earthquakes upheaved portions of the center to the surface. And then over the centuries, the Wisconsin Glacier wore down the dirt and exposed the outcroppings so that they could actually be seen right at as you were walking through the woods. Sometimes you can even see reddish patches and outcroppings in granite alongside highways, especially on the New York State Thruway. You can see a lot of rust forming on the granite rock walls that were blasted out. The patches are rust from oxidation of the ore that's embedded in the rock. The iron is so plentiful along the Redding Prong that early miners needed only to dig shallow pits in order to get at it. They did not have to go into deep vein mines. They just followed a vein until it went underground far enough to start taking on groundwater and then they abandoned the pit and started over somewhere else. In addition, the Ramapo's mountainous terrain provided good changes in elevation, so that the water from rivers and streams could be harnessed for water power and water wheels. This was before the era of electricity, so it was water power that they relied on to power the blast furnaces and the mining equipment.
When did colonists discover that the Ramapo Mountains were rich with this iron ore?
The native Lenape people of the Ramapo region were actually already aware of the ore's presence, but they used it exclusively for its red pigment. They were able to point out the rusting iron ore to the first colonial settlers came up. The first one we know about was Cornelius Board, who was a Welsh prospector in the employ of William Alexander of Basking Ridge, who was also known as Lord Stirling. He inherited the Scottish title and used it here in America. He was also a later Revolutionary War general. He employed Board to come up into the Ramapo Mountains and look primarily for copper deposits, but he was unable to find copper. He was able to identify the iron ore mines and decided that he would set up some iron forges on the streams in Sterling, which is in today's town of Tuxedo in Orange County, and just west of Sloatsburg in Ringwood, New Jersey.
At that time, England constrained the colonists, right?
Yes, during these early years, iron makers like Cornelius Board started setting up these forges and furnaces. Mostly they were smelting the iron ore into raw pig iron, which is a intermediate stage of manufacturing that was sent back to England so that English manufacturers could then create products and send them back to us and sell them in the colonies. But by 1750, American ironmaking had become such a strong industry with at least 80 iron forge and furnace operations operating in the New England and Mid Atlantic states that the British decided to put some controls on the manufacturing of products and passed the Iron Act of 1750. It restricted American iron makers to purely mining and refining pig iron, but no manufacturing of products. That was a privilege reserved for English manufacturers, who, of course, were selling their products back to the American colonists at a very high markup to compensate for the cost of transporting by ship, very much like the protectionist tariff policies that we've recently seen. They're attacks on the consumer without representation and without their consent. And the Iron Act of 1750 really contributed to the unrest that exploded, a rebellion against the intolerable acts that started the Revolutionary War.
What role did these local iron mines and furnaces play in supporting the Continental Army?
So by 1775, the Sterling Ironworks were being run mostly by a local man named Peter Townsend. His parents had come to Long Island in the early 1700s from England, and Peter grew up in Orange County, where his father had bought 2,000 acres in the Cheesecox patent. Though he was technically a British subject, Peter had never lived in England, and he was deeply connected through personal and business ties to many of the prominent families of the New York and New Jersey colonies. In an interesting side note, he was a first cousin of the Robert Townsend who provided intelligence about the British to George Washington as part of the famous Culper spy ring. So when the rebellion began, Peter immediately sided with the Patriot cause, corresponding frequently with George Washington about the Army's needs for material that could be made at the Sterling Iron Works.
The Hudson River chain, of course, is a very significant part of what happened in the Revolutionary War. How was that connected to local ironworks?
So the first chain that was strung across the Hudson went between Fort Montgomery and Anthony's Nose, and that one was forged at Philip Livingston's Ancram Iron Works across the river in Columbia County. It didn't last long. The British sailed right over it and dismantled it when they attacked Fort Montgomery. The replacement was commissioned in 1778. That was the second chain, known as the Great Chain across the Hudson, and it stretched from West Point to Constitution Island. Its huge chain links and iron hardware for the wooden booms were forged at the Sterling Iron Works from iron that was mined and smelted at both Sterling and Ringwood Long Pond furnaces. The Great Chain was highly effective. The British military never attempted to breach it. and it stayed in place until the war ended in 1783. Part of the wooden boom actually is now on display in the museum at Washington's headquarters in Newburgh, and chain links are on permanent display in an outdoor monument at West Point Military Academy.
How did the chain work?
They were huge 65-pound links that were forged at the Sterling Forge, and then they were mounted on booms, wooden booms, that were strung together by smaller chains that were also forged at Sterling. The entire thing was transported in pieces, links and booms, to West Point, where it was assembled actually on the water, the booms helping to float the chain links with boats that would pull it across as they attached, as they went, because it would have been much too heavy to try to transport the entire chain on its own.
Right, right.
It
Oh,
was very, very heavy. It was at a narrower point, I believe, in the river than the Fort Montgomery chain, so and wasn't quite so affected by the tides. So the British ships were not able to sail over it. It became an effective barrier to keep ships from coming up the river, because the great fear that Washington had was that the British would be able to sail up the river, um, past West Point up toward Albany, and split the New England colonies from the mid-Atlantic colonies. And united we stand, divided we fall, so to speak.
it was put together actually on the water, in the
Yes.
water. Yes. Okay, interesting. So, what other kinds of tools, weapons, or materials were produced then?
Oh, in addition to the great chain, Sterling and Ringwood forged military hardware and all kinds of everyday tools for the Continental Army, cannonballs, wagon tires, plowshares, axe heads, even kettles, for the army to cook when it was out on campaign. Sterling Ironworks, in particular, specialized in anchors for Navy warships. And it also, I recently learned, cast iron cannon at the site. I had not known that before. In 1777, according to Washington's correspondence, Ringwood fulfilled an order for 20 cast iron camp stoves to be used in the winter camps at Valley Forge, Morristown, and New Windsor. One of those stoves has actually survived. We think it may have been damaged. There's a large crack in one side, so it may never have actually been shipped. It was found in the basement of Ringwood Manor 50 years ago when they were doing some inventorying. It's now on semi-permanent display at the Long Pond Ironworks Museum in Hewitt, New Jersey, and it is, as far as we know, the only Revolutionary War era cast iron camp stove that survived.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Who was Robert Erskine and how is he connected to the iron mining in our region?
So Robert Erskine is probably best known in history as Surveyor General to the Continental Army and also as George Washington's chief map maker. But he originally came to the American Colonies in 1771 to take over the management of a group of New York and New Jersey ironmaking properties owned by a syndicate of investors based in London. The properties included the Ringwood and Long Pond Ironworks in New Jersey and the Cortland Ironworks in Westchester County, which had originally been founded by Peter Hasenclever, a German-born merchant with English citizenship, who had great, great dreams to create a vast iron empire in the new colonies based on the business model of mining the iron, smelting it into pigs, selling it to England, and making his great fortunes that way. Didn't really work out that way for Peter Hasenclever. He arrived in 1764. He imported 500 or more German and English iron workers and their families, smuggling them out of Europe in order to provide the labor he needed, and got his ironworks going. But over the next couple of years, he spent a great deal more money than his investors expected and couldn't always account very well for where the money was going. So he was recalled in 1769, and in 1771, he was replaced by Robert Erskine as the Iron
Oh,
Master over the American company, or by then known as the London Company, iron properties. The operations that Erskine managed consisted of three blast furnaces in three different locations, at least five forges, and more than 50 active magnetite iron ore mines, and employed up to 500 to 600 people, both directly as iron workers and miners, and indirectly as colliers, teamsters, and farmers.
During the war, were there any of these mines or furnaces that remained loyal to the British?
It's kind of a complicated question. Some went out of operation. Some iron masters who might have been loyal to England would probably have ceased operation. Didn't happen in the Ramapo region in northern New Jersey.
Hmm.
Most of the ironworks really kind of figured they were here and the king wasn't. And if they were going to make their money, they had best help the army.
Yeah.
So most ended up being siding with the Patriots
Hmm.
rather than with their British bosses, so to speak,
Yeah.
those that were managing operations for investors. What's interesting about Erskine is that he was still corresponding with his London employers in the beginning of the war. He was keeping them up on all of the political unrest in the colonies and actually making suggestions for how they should proceed to protect their interests in the colonies. But at some point, even though he was a Scottish man working for a British company, he made a very fateful life changing decision to join the Patriot cause and cut ties with his investors and put the ironworks in the service of helping Washington. At pain of death. Had
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
Americans lost, it would have been treason,
Yeah.
and he would have lost his job at the very least.
Hmm. How did Erskine meet Washington? How did they become acquainted?
I'm not entirely sure. I think that he had heard about Robert Erskine through his connections with Peter Townsend. He George Washington would have certainly made an effort to get to know Erskine. He was running a large ironworks. They did seem to hit it off because by 1775, Erskine was petitioning Washington for exemptions for his workers. He kept losing his workers, especially his more casual laborers, his colliers, and his teamsters, to Continental Army service, or they would actually run off to Rockland County and join the raiding bands that supplied
Ah.
forage to the British among the loyalists. So it was hard for him to keep his works going. He asked for exemptions for his workers, but Washington was unable to get that to happen. But he did convince the New Jersey legislature to give Erskine a commission as a captain and form his own militia unit. So we do know that for a time he was drilling active militia at the ironworks to protect the ironworks.
Oh, that's
Um,
fascinating.
they did become very good friends, and actually, Erskine died before the war ended in 1781 of pneumonia that he probably contracted while he was out surveying and making maps in the field. And George Washington attended his funeral on the morning of October 2nd, 1780, and then traveled to Tappan because, of course, that was the day that Major John Andre was hanged.
Wow, that was the same
Yeah,
day.
same day. It
Amazing.
was a very big, tiring day for George Washington.
Oh my goodness. So, what evidence of early mining activity can still be found in the Ramapo region today?
There's so much if you know what you're looking for, but if you're starting out and you want to learn more about early mining and iron making, the best places to go are the Sterling Forest State Park Visitor Center in Tuxedo I think it's on Old Forge Road, and also Ringwood State Park and Long Pond Ironworks State Park in Passaic County. Long Pond Ironworks in particular has remnants of the three iron blast furnaces that operated there between 1764 and 1882. Two of them are Civil War era furnaces, but there is the archaeological remains of the colonial furnace that's still visible. There are tons and tons of mine pits throughout Sterling Forest State Park and all through the Ramapo Mountain woods. I recommend if people are interested in checking out iron mines that they get a hold of Ed Lennox's book, Iron Mine Trails, which was published by the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, but with a caveat because early mines can be very dangerous. So if you are exploring, be sure to stay on the marked trails and do not approach mine openings, especially the ones that are water filled or involve vertical drops. They're very, very dangerous and can come upon you kind of surprisingly in the woods.
Are they marked, or can you just come upon them and if you know what you're looking for, you know what you're looking at, but otherwise you wouldn't, right?
The mines sometimes are very obscured. You can often tell by the tailing piles, large piles of discarded rock with bits of iron ore in it alongside. Some of those are just test pits, but some were active working mines. I believe Sterling Forest and Ringwood State Park have cataloged all the mines and their
Okay.
locations so that um, people won't be too surprised by them if you
Okay.
seek the information.
Hmm.
Iron furnaces at Sterling and Long Pond Ironworks are very visible on marked walking trails with self-guided and often guided tours. Um, Forges are a little more difficult. They usually sat in the middle of rivers and are
Oh,
generally gone, but Doc Bain of Sterling Forest State Park, the former park ranger who now leads tours, often shows people where the earliest forge at Sterling Forest was.
any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, much has been written over the past 50 years about Washington holding the Ramapo Pass during the American Revolution and the reasons that he found that corridor so important. You know, they've highlighted the Clove Road's position as a transportation corridor between New Jersey and West Point. Also, the patriot-friendly taverns such as Suffern's, Hidman's, and Sloat's taverns played hosting the general and his aides during the war. And all of that is important, but it's often overlooked that maybe the most important reason Washington fortified the Ramapo Pass and kept people there to protect it throughout the war, both militia and Continental Army troops, was to protect the ostensibly British people who were making the cannonballs and other material his army needed to beat the British forces and win true political and economic independence for our maturing American colonies. It's kind of a forgotten history that's worth exploring as we celebrate the American Revolution's 250th anniversary.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so earlier you talked about that there was mining here and all the way down in the mid-Atlantic states. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And but was most of the mining done here?
Mines tended to be opened close to the ironworks because it
Okay,
was so heavy and difficult to transport.
I see.
So if you find an iron furnace, you'll most likely find ore sources nearby. The difference is that a lot of the ore that was mined was hematite iron ore outside of the Ramapo Mountains. It's makes a perfectly good iron, but it's not as pure. The magnetite is extremely pure. I think somebody once said it's about 85% pure iron. So it's the smelting process. You get more iron yield for the
I see.
iron ore that you put into the furnace.
I see. Okay. Talk a little bit about the current exhibition at the Historical Society right now.
Sure. The current exhibition is Rockland and the Revolution, a 250th anniversary exploration. And for the exhibition, we decided to go purely Rockland. The exhibition is very Rockland County centric. Rockland played a huge role in the Revolutionary War. We talk about the very obvious things that people know about the spy and the traitor, the Benedict Arnold, John Andre treason, and John Andre hanging. We talk about the Battle of Stony Point, whose anniversary is coming up. So I think it's the 247th anniversary of the Battle of Stony Point this year. But we also talk about less well known things, the composition of the Home Guard militia that formed in Orangetown and Haverstraw, and we provide a list of the names of all the members of that militia, which is kind of interesting to folks who see all of those names that persist in Rockland County today. We also talk about the defense of the Hudson and the less well-known naval battles and skirmishes that took place often right off the shore of Nyack and Haverstraw Village.
Thank you, Sue, for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
To recap, Susan Deeks' presentation, Ramapo Mountain Iron and the American Revolution, will take place on Sunday, July 26th, 2026, at 1 p.m. in the lower level community room of the Historical Society of Rockland County. We're located at 20 Zucker Road in New City, New York, and the price is $5 per person. Once again, we thank the town of Ramapo, Supervisor Michael Specht, and the Ramapo Town Board for sponsoring this episode of Crossroads of Rockland History. We are grateful for their support of this program and of the Historical Society of Rockland County. Keep in mind that all of the information that we discussed will be available in the show notes. I hope you'll tune in to the next Crossroads of Rockland History on Monday, August 17th at 10 a.m. Our current exhibition at the Historical Society is Rockland and the Revolution, a 250th anniversary exploration. It is open now, and exhibition hours are Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays from 12 noon to 4 p.m. Admission is $7 for adults and $3 for children. Check our website to find out about all of the events and programs on tap. Our web address again is rocklandhistory.org, or call us at 845-634-9629. That's rocklandhistory.org or 634-9629. Another great way to keep up with us is to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, or read our blog on Tumblr. Don't forget that most of our broadcasts are archived at rocklandhistory.org as podcasts. You can also find archived episodes on all major podcast platforms. I'm Clare Sheridan, and thanks for listening to Crossroads of Rockland History.